Welcome in, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise Retirement. Your host, Loren Sherman, is a certified financial planner and owner of the flat fee firm Integrity Wealth Management. He curates each episode with you in mind. Whether a work-optional lifestyle is on the horizon or you're already there, this show has something for you. With that, listen in, and I hope you enjoy the show.
All right. Welcome to another Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise Retirement. I am your host, of course, Loren Sherman. And in an effort to continually offer additional value to our clients, today we sit down with Dave Olchowka, who can help us make sure that we're getting the most out of our P&C insurance. So, Dave, welcome in, and thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
So, Dave, I'm going to do a quick lead in, a quick bio here, and then you can feel free to fill in the gaps as we talk a little bit more.
Great.
So Dave Olchowka has been in the property and casualty space dating back to 2008. And after feeling like the insurance review process was a bit outdated and stale, in 2022, Dave's vision of modernizing the review process became a reality as he launched his own firm called Prizm. Using a combination of technology paired with human expertise means that for clients of Prizm, they get an efficient review process and clarity of the coverage that they have or the coverage that they need. This means not overpaying for coverage, but perhaps even more importantly, making sure that they have the right coverage. And not only starting with the right coverage, but continually updating that with ongoing reviews. So Dave, once again, welcome in. And what do you say we jump into some of the questions that we have for you?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And it's great opener. Appreciate that.
Well, so right out of the gate, I think that traditionally a big part of the P&C world, at least from where I come from, it's been a person's relationship with their agent. And I think it used to kind of be, maybe this has changed a bit, but it used to be that everybody would go with whoever was local in your town or your city, and there was a relationship built there. But I think that doesn't necessarily mean that you're getting the best rates or that even you had the proper coverage. So maybe before we dive into the specifics of Prizm, it could be helpful if you want to share a little bit about yourself first.
Yeah, happy to share and even touch base a little bit on your first sort of statement there.
Yeah.
But as you mentioned, I've been in the insurance industry, since 2008. It was actually before that, but 2008 was when I opened my first insurance agency, which was a State Farm agency. And it was very local, right? So I understand, that local relationship, dealing with local people. And then as my career continued to move on, after 11 years of owning a State Farm agency, I moved into the corporate insurance world, focusing on the affluent and high net worth, partnering with wealth advisors like yourself to do insurance reviews for their clients nationwide. And I think that local relationship works up into a point of when a client potentially outgrows what that local provider can offer. And the relationship piece is good, but we found that it's less about that I've got a guy or a girl, right? And it's Loren down the street or it's Dave down the street, but more that when they need to connect with somebody, they can. And somebody who it's not a 1-800 number that they're calling. They want to know that they're calling a place where the people know who they are. And I think you can do that even at scale if it's done correctly.
Right. Yeah, that's helpful. I think the world has become closer in a sense because, I've obviously after everybody's gone through COVID now, everybody became pretty used to using technology. So I think that probably helped bring down some of the barriers as well, I imagine.
Absolutely. And if you have the right technology in place, which we feel like we do, we give multiple channels of access for clients to reach out to us, whether that's email, phone, text messaging, secure messaging through the Prizm portal. There's a lot of ways to get in touch so that we can meet clients where they are, and there's always a real human on the back end of how that, whatever outreach that they use, there's a real human on the back end coming in to answer those questions in a timely manner. And these are people
Yeah.
who are professionals who have been in the business for a very long time. And I think that's where that need for, the relationship comes into play. It's not specifically a relationship with one individual. It's just knowing that a relationship with real humans who can answer their questions in a timely manner exists.
Right. Yeah, I think that's important because I get a little frustrated when I am, pushed to a chat box and then it's AI that you're speaking with. So having the real human connection is important. And I think as I was reading that introduction for you, I mentioned that the combination of technology paired with human expertise, which is often how we describe our services at our firm too. I think having that human expertise is really important because at least in my world, what I've found is that the technology does a really good job with giving us an abundance of information, but then the human expertise, their job is to kind of discern that and take that information and kind of convert it into wisdom and into an action plan instead of just kind of an overwhelming amount of information, is at least how I look at that a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of looking at it. I feel very similar about how we do what we do. And the technology on our end was really built to remove the pain points from the process that have existed for so many years and have really held advisors like yourself back from making insurance reviews a consistent part of their value-added services and their overall approach to, holistic approach to risk management.
Yeah. And think one thing that just pops in my mind too, just full disclosure, part of I think why advisors have been hesitant to get into this space is because we're a little bit worried that anything you do is a reflection on us. So if you guys drop the ball, then it's kind of a reflection on us. And as we talk through this, one of the things that you had me do first off was take myself, my wife, we went through this process ourselves as kind of clients, or I guess as what we would be asking our clients to do. So I've gone through that process and saw how easy it was, how frankly, how pretty quick it was as well. And we can talk a little bit more about that feedback, but um, I want to jump into a question. Kind of the thought process behind this question is, why did you create Prizm? So I guess what problems or challenges does Prizm seek to improve or fix in this industry?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, simply put, I created Prizm to remove the pain points from the process, right? To be a true integrated value-added service with financial advisors, whether it's through the tools that they use or directly, connected with them. The My time at some of the biggest brokers in the world um, was fielding pain points from advisors and clients on the process, right? And you talked about one of the things that is concerning for you and other advisors is that making sure that the process reflects, or the referrals or insurance reviews that they do for their clients, like that process reflects the same things that you give them from a service perspective, right? And it
Right.
really hasn't traditionally. The advisors don't really know which client is the right fit for these particular brokers. They don't know what information to provide for each individual client, and then you reach out and you have to ask all these questions just to qualify with a broker. Then the broker says, yeah, and by the way, I need all of this information, now go get it for me, right? And you're trying to safeguard that client relationship, so you become that quarterback, that person that needs to gather all that information. And it
Right.
you may not even know all the things, when it's presented to you, like, oh, well, I don't, how do I get this information? What do I do? And then you've got to ask the client all these questions. You've got to scrounge for this. And it becomes a very significant process of back and forth and back and forth. It takes you
Sure.
away from the things you really should be doing for the client. But you have to do it to make sure that your client doesn't feel like, oh my gosh, this is overwhelming, and they just abandon the process, right?
Yeah.
So Prizm was built to remove all of those pain points and build consistency in the process. Whether your client is worth $100 million or $100, whether they have one house or five houses, our process is exactly the same from start to finish, and our deliverable is the same from start to finish. So you
Yeah.
build that consistency, which builds trust and allows advisors to say, hey, now we found a place where we can actually do this for every client without having to qualify them. It's a truly value added service that we can be proactive on instead of reactive.
Right. I like that consistency of the process because, I often explain that too, that in my world, um, the a lot of financial advisors they might not openly say this, but they kind of have like A, B, and C clients. And in my world, we just have the same process for all clients. And it kind of works well because we have a flat fee. I often say it doesn't make a difference in our process whether you have $1 million or $10 million. Now, where you move that decimal point means a lot to you, to the client, but from our process, from that perspective, it's the same regardless. So I like that consistency of the process is a big thing. So moving into, I guess, what I've been using kind of the generic term of PNC. Can you talk a little bit about what types of coverage that entails, and then maybe walk us through a little bit what a review process would look like of what someone would experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are heavily focused on the personal lines aspect of a client's insurance needs. That goes hand in hand with their personal financial matters, right? So home, auto, valuable articles, boats, certainly umbrella, which is
Yeah.
one of very overlooked coverage with clients that need them. And, anything that has to do with their personal life is what we're focused on. We don't do life or health or disability. We
Right.
find that many advisors, are licensed and do that internally, or their companies do that, and we're, really you want to be a partner to advisors and not somebody they look at as competition, but as somebody who adds a
Sure.
value added service. So we stick to that niche of, the personal lines of insurance.
Yeah. And I've found that that's sometimes, um, I think the traditional model, or I don't know if it was traditional model, but sometimes people like to add more and more services, and then they try to do all things to all people, and you become kind of spread too thin. So I think kind of keeping that narrow lane of what you do best is probably a good way to go about it.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a jack of all trades, master of none, right?
Exactly, exactly. So right out of the gate, just kind of from a practical standpoint, if I said, okay, I'm gonna John and Mary, let's say you're going to have your home and auto and everything else reviewed by Prism. If, I've gone through this myself, so I can speak to it a little bit, but
Yeah.
we send a link that they would click on, and then right out of the gate it's going to be asking some of their really basic information that they're going to know the answers to. It's not going to be a bunch of questions that they have no idea. So it's going to be what's your name, what's your address, things of that nature. And then I was impressed by, I think I just plugged in the address, and immediately it kind of started filling in the blanks, and it knew some things about me already right out of the gate. And then instead of digging out all of these deck pages and things like that, which is one way to go about it, and we can send those to you guys to review, but maybe an even more streamlined way would be where it just connects directly with your carrier. If you have a login to Farm Bureau, State Farm, whoever your coverage is through, where you just log in and then it pulls that data that you guys need. Maybe you can expand on that a little bit. I don't know. Did I accurately describe that?
Yeah, you nailed it pretty well. That's good. It does start with that link, right? That in we've created that for you so you can utilize it for your clients, which is a unique URL specific to your organization. And when you click on that link or provide that to a client to engage in the insurance review, the moment they start, our system knows exactly where that opportunity or that review is coming from. So you don't have to call me. You don't have to say, hey, Dave, I just put through Bob and Mary Smith or shared the link, right? We know that it's coming from your organization just because of that link. And that again, you were right, where it's very surface level, the questions that we're asking them. We're not asking them hard hitting questions. So, what's the square footage of your house? When's the last time you replaced your roof, right?
Right.
What's the VIN of your vehicle? Our system pulls all of that data in through a significant number of third-party data sources. We're able to gather 99% of the information every time so that we don't have to go back to a client and ask any questions prior to a review. And to them, it's that 3 minutes or less in the risk profile questionnaire, and then linking your deck pages at the end with that technology that we use, which is entering your username and password for your specific carrier. And in 30 seconds, all the declarations pages flow into the back end of our system. So you don't have to go download them and fumble them and PDF them and email them. There's
Right.
still a way that things can be done. And we certainly have to engage in that still today because not everybody has access to an online portal or they don't remember their password. Although the technology we use, you can actually reset your password through it. So
Okay.
it becomes a pretty seamless way of doing things. But yeah, you can in under 3 minutes give us everything we need to get a comprehensive review on your insurance program, and we deliver that in 3 to 5 business days, where the traditional markets are 2 weeks or more.
Uh, Yeah, you're removing a lot of those hurdles when you don't have to know all the details of you're not as I think clients would get frustrated if you're asking them a bunch of questions about the square foot of their home and how long they've owned this or that and things of that nature where you're really removing a lot of those hurdles. And I only did this a couple of weeks ago, but I was going to say it only took me about 2 minutes and that's at least off the top of my head. And it sounds like that was right based on what you're saying.
Yeah.
So, very, very easy process. So, once again, just removing a lot of those hurdles. And then, not to jump to the end, I guess, of the review that you did for us, but what I really appreciated too was you guys work with roughly how many companies? Is it like 30 plus or so?
Yeah, we work with over 35 insurance
Okay.
carriers, whether it's the standard, what they call admitted markets, right? Or excess and surplus lines, which is higher risk markets, private flood companies, earthquake companies. We have over 35 different insurance carriers
Okay.
to place different risks. And our reviews come in different ways, right? And I think that's a real positive that we add as well. We're not just only delivering a review when we've quoted another carrier that we want a client to purchase, right? That's sort of the last thing on our mind. The first thing on our mind is advice and consultation. And in your situation, what we actually did was told you, hey, where you're at is a pretty good fit.
Yeah.
There's just a couple tweaks that I would make to get it in line with what your current risk profile is today. And that's something we do quite often. If a client is in a good place with a good insurance carrier and maybe they just need a little tweak, maybe, hey, here's an opportunity to save a little money, tweak this deductible. Your net worth is clearly gone up since you took out this umbrella. We think, 5 million is more appropriate for you. Or you're missing some specific endorsement for very little money could be added but provide significant benefit in the event of a loss. We're happy to give that advice and consultation, at zero
Right.
cost. But if we look at a program and we say, hey, there's some major deficiencies here and we know we can do better, and we take it out to the market and identify a better solution, we'll deliver a side-by-side proposal that shows here's what you currently have, here's the price, here's all the coverage limits, all the endorsements that you do or do not have, and here's what we recommend. And we show those side by side in such a very clear way that allows people to clearly identify the deficiencies and see where we're recommending higher
Right.
coverage. And they have the opportunity then either, book a call with us to talk about it in more detail, or they can click accept in the proposal and accept digitally and move forward with purchasing that new program.
Okay. Yeah, that's it's even the review process is really seamless, but it sounds like switching coverage if that's needed or makes sense is a really seamless process too.
It is a seamless process. I'm actually not sure where the idea of switching insurance is hard came from. I think if you're a Fortune 500 company, switching insurance is pretty hard, right? With all these
Yeah.
moving parts, or even businesses that have a lot of trucks or do different services. But personal insurance is the easiest thing in the world to switch if there's in
Yeah.
most scenarios, if you're not in a like what they would call an excess and surplus lines program, there's no cancellation or termination fees for personal insurance. It's all prorated, and all the money is refunded to you for what you haven't used and have paid for. So it becomes a very simple switch to go to something that's better,
Right.
not only from a coverage perspective, but we believe we provide, the very best service model as well.
Yeah, that was something that you brought to my attention too that I should have known, but I pay annually for all of our coverage, and I wasn't quite sure when my annual renewal was coming up. And you said, well, not to jump ahead, but if we need to change, not a big deal. They just prorate back anything. And I reviewed ours just last year. So, that was kind of where I was going with that I really appreciated that you guys take a consultative approach, and your advice was, hey, you're in great shape with where you're at. Just maybe here's a few observations, a few tweaks that we might recommend.
Yep.
But it wasn't like a hard sell of like, hey, you need to switch to this or switch to that. So I really appreciated that, especially coming kind of from the advisory fiduciary world. It makes, I think, in alignment with our beliefs as well.
100%. It's the only way we can do it to be a true partner to you guys.
Yeah. One kind of technical question too. How many states do you guys work in?
We're in all 50.
All 50. Okay. So
Yeah.
that helps as well. We have clients all over the US.
Yeah.
Um, I know this question might be a lot harder to answer, but if there's like a quote unquote average, or if someone said, well, I haven't reviewed my coverage for 5, maybe 10 years, how much are we talking that I might be able to save? And I know the savings in my mind, that's kind of secondary. First off, we want to make sure that you have the right coverage. But if someone asked you that, do you have any way of answering that question of, yeah, I know it's kind of, completely depends on how much they're paying in the first place. But do you see a range of, hey, we were able to save a couple $1,000s and maintain the same type of coverage that we have? Or what kind of savings are we talking here?
Yeah, we don't talk about savings, right? We
Okay.
we look at savings as a an added bonus, because our number one priority is to ensure that clients are adequately insured, right?
Okay.
Because if you come to me today and you've got a house that has a over $1 million cost to rebuild, but some mass market insurer is only insuring you for 500,000, and I point that deficiency out and I tell you, well, it's going to cost you, $1,000 or $2,000 more a year, but it's not going to cost you $600,000 if your house burns down.
All right.
Most people who are working with financial advisors who are, earning high incomes, they're more concerned about being covered properly. And nobody wants to pay more than they need to pay for
Right.
insurance. And we certainly don't present the highest cost provider ever. We look at significant number of providers when we do a review, and as long as we're not taking something away from the client, whether we're looking at, if we're in the high end carriers like Chubb and Pure and Cincinnati, those policy forms are basically verbatim from one carrier to the next. So if Chubb is
Sure.
$20,000 and Cincinnati's $10,000, but the coverage is the same, I'm going to show the client Cincinnati, right? So we're always going to give them the best combination of coverage and price. And if we get into a situation where a client is just, sometimes we find clients are insured, in a pretty decent way with one of the mass market carriers, but when they get into that home value of $750,000 or more, that starts to be beyond the appetite of those mass market carriers. So the premiums tend to be higher with those mass market carriers. So when we see those situations, a lot of times we do save people money moving them to an affluent carrier who's built for that size home and those higher end features inside homes. So there are ways to save. It's not always just a review is always going to cost you more money. The number one thing is always going to be, are we covered properly?
Yeah.
Because cost means nothing if we're not.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. And I think so many times we're a little bit unaware of how we are actually covered. You don't want to find out that you're underinsured when I guess the time would be when something bad happens or when something happens to your house or something like that. So better to have it reviewed earlier rather than later.
100%. Finding out the hard way is the worst way.
Right. Exactly. All right, Loren here. I wanted to jump in and hit pause for a moment, as that seems like a good place to break this up into two separate episodes. So go ahead and use the show notes where we already have that link in there where you can review your coverage. But stick around. In a couple weeks, we'll have the part 2 video come out, and then we'll jump right in. I don't think I have anything else for you right now. So come back and we'll have the rest of this video shortly. Or if you're listening audio, you can find us on just about every podcast app out there. So see you again soon. God bless.
Thank you for listening in and supporting this show. And if you have a moment, we'd love a 5-star review to help this podcast reach even more listeners. Also, this show thrives on feedback from its audience. So if you have any topics you'd like to hear covered or have anyone specific you'd like to see join the show, please email your recommendations to our address, hello@integrityguidance.com. That's hello@integrityguidance.com. We review every email that comes in, and we will do our best to include any recommendations you have for us. Thanks again, and be sure to follow our show so you don't miss an episode. This podcast is for entertainment and informational purposes only and is not intended as specific tax, legal, or investment advice. Loren Sherman is a certified financial planner and owner of Integrity Wealth Management, a flat-fee firm which serves pre-retirees and retirees in search of their own work optional lifestyle.